Naomi Akande tightened the faded scarf around her head as the morning heat of Lagos crept through the dusty sky, filtering down through cracks in the rusted bridge she called home. At just 22, Naomi had already lived several lifetimes. Once a schoolgirl who aced her math classes, then a mechanic's daughter covered in grease and proud of it, then an orphan swallowed whole by a city that did not care. She moved through the world with a quiet strength, carrying her only belongings in a worn-out backpack, a rusted wrench, a water-stained Bible, and a photo of her late father, who once told her, "Machines may fail, but your will must never." Every day, she rose before the markets did, scavenging for food and scrap, anything to keep herself one step ahead of hunger. The traders at Ojodu Market knew her. Some pitied her, most ignored her, and a few muttered under their breath that girls like her didn't belong near machines. Still, Naomi kept her head down and her senses sharp. She could identify a faulty timing belt from a block away. She knew the hum of a misfiring engine like a lullaby. Her father, Moses Akande, once ran a bustling garage in Mushin known as Auto Moses. People said he could fix any car and break any curse, and Naomi was his shadow, learning by watching, by doing, by living in the heartbeat of pistons and oil. But a drunk driver stole all that in one crash, one moment, one blurred red light. The insurance never came. The driver disappeared. And Naomi, 17 and alone, found herself sleeping beside the same tools she once used to chase dreams. Each night she curled beneath her makeshift shelter, a tent stitched from discarded tarpaulin, faded political posters, and a broken umbrella, and listened to the city breathe. Some nights were loud with music and engines. Others were full of silence that screamed. She never cried, not even when her stomach growled like an engine out of oil. Instead, she memorized diagrams from torn manuals. She rewired dead car batteries for street vendors. She taught herself code by reading the backs of discarded tech magazines. She prayed, not for miracles, but for moments. And one such moment arrived wrapped in steam and silver chrome. It was just past noon, and the sun had turned the asphalt into a griddle. Naomi sat under the shade of a mango tree near the traffic junction, sketching engine parts in the dirt with a stick, when a sharp hiss sliced through the noise. She looked up. A silver Bentley had stalled across the road, steam escaping from under its hood. The driver, a tall man in a brown uniform, looked helpless as he fanned the smoke with a cloth. Behind the tinted window, she saw a figure in a white dress shirt tapping impatiently on his phone. Something in Naomi clicked. She stood up, brushed the dust off her trousers, and crossed the street. "It's your radiator," she said, startling the driver. "And your fan belt's shot." The driver blinked. "How do you know that?" Naomi stepped closer, pointing. "That's coolant, not oil. The steam pattern's wrong, and the belt squeals when you idle." The man in the car opened the door and stepped out. He was tall, sharply dressed, his sunglasses glinting even in the shade. "Let her try," he said calmly. The driver hesitated, then moved aside. Naomi reached into her bag, pulled out her wrench, and got to work. In 5 minutes, she tightened the slipping belt, released air from the coolant reservoir, and cleaned the intake fan with a cloth she'd washed the night before. When the engine purred back to life, the suited man looked at her like she had just rewritten gravity. "That was impressive," he said. "What's your name?" "Naomi," she replied, eyes steady. "Naomi Akande." The name made him pause. "Akande, as in Auto Moses?" Naomi nodded slowly. "He was my father." The man blinked, then gestured toward the open car door. "Get in. It's hot out here." Naomi hesitated. She had never sat in a car like that before, let alone a Bentley. Her fingers tightened around her wrench as she climbed in, careful not to touch the pristine white leather with her dirty sleeves. The car smelled like cedar and money. He sat across from her. "My name is Julian Ease. Your father taught my uncle. He used to talk about a little girl who could replace brake pads faster than his senior technicians." Naomi allowed herself a small smile. He told that to everyone. Julian watched her for a moment. What happened after he passed? Naomi looked out the window. The garage closed. No one would hire a girl mechanic. I've been on my own since. Julian leaned back, his jaw tightening as if the weight of the world had just doubled. "You shouldn't be fixing cars on the street," he said. "You should be teaching others, building something bigger." Then he paused. "Would you work for me?" Naomi blinked. "You're serious?" "I run a tech foundation," he said. "We just launched an auto innovation hub in Lecky. I need people who understand machines and the streets. You're both." Naomi looked at her greasy hands. "I don't speak polished English. I don't wear suits. I sleep under a bridge." Julian shrugged. "Neither did I once." The silence between them was thick but not uncomfortable. He reached into his wallet and handed her a business card. "Be there tomorrow at 8 a.m. Adira Auto Tech, Lecky Phase 1. Tell them Julian sent you." Naomi clutched the card like it was a passport. That night, she didn't sleep. She lay under her tarp, staring at the stars peeking through holes in the fabric, heart racing. Was this real? Would he remember? Or was it just another false hope? By 7:45 a.m., Naomi stood in front of a glass building that looked like it belonged in another world. She wore jeans borrowed from her friend Simi and a clean white shirt she had scrubbed the night before until her knuckles bled. Her scarf was tied neatly. Her backpack still held her wrench, her Bible, and now the card with Julian's name. She stepped through the automated doors into a space flooded with chrome and glass, where holographic diagnostics danced across floating screens and staff in spotless uniforms walked past her without a glance. The receptionist stared at her suspiciously until Julian himself appeared, dressed casually in a black polo and jeans. "Naomi," he said, smiling. "Come, let me show you around." He walked her through the building, past rows of hybrid engines and AI vehicle simulations. Then they entered a red-lit wing called the Bay. "This is where we test our self-diagnostic vehicles," Julian said. "You'll be working here." Before she could respond, a man in a designer lab coat approached. His name tag read Engar, Marcus, Lead Systems. He looked her up and down. "This her?" he asked Julian. "The street mechanic?" Julian didn't answer. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. You fix cars with magic." The other engineers chuckled. Naomi ignored them. She turned to a sleek prototype with flashing error codes and listened. "It's not your AI," she said quietly. "Your heat regulator is feeding bad data to the system. The synthetic valves hissing." Marcus laughed. "You got that by listening?" Naomi knelt, adjusted a torque point, recalibrated the thermal feed, and rebooted the system. The dashboard cleared. The car responded with a clean hum. Silence fell over the room. Julian smiled from the observation deck. That afternoon, Naomi sat alone in the employee lounge with her simple lunch wrapped in foil. Whispers floated around her like smoke. Is she really staying? Julian's got a type, huh? She kept her head down. Julian passed by with an investor but paused when he saw her. Their eyes met. He didn't smile this time. He just nodded, then kept walking. Later, his assistant Dapo leaned in. "Staff are talking," he warned. "They think you're involved." Julian said nothing at first. Then, firmly, "She's talented. That's all they need to know." But even he felt the pull. It wasn't romantic, not yet. It was respect, awe, a mirror he didn't expect to find. 2 days later, he handed her a navy blazer and said, "You're coming with me. Tech Auto Expo in Ikoyi. It's time the world saw you." Simi helped with her hair. Lami, the assistant, added a touch of makeup. Naomi stepped into the gala beside Julian like someone who had built the floor herself. Flashbulbs popped. Influencers stared. One reporter asked, "Who is she?" Julian replied, "Naomi Akande, one of Nigeria's brightest minds in auto innovation." Naomi nearly stopped breathing when she saw a portrait of her father displayed on a wall under the words, "Auto Pioneers of Africa." She turned to Julian, tears in her eyes. "You did this?" He shook his head. "No, we did." That night, under the shimmer of chandeliers and chrome, Naomi realized something had changed. Not just around her, within her. She wasn't a ghost anymore. She was a name, a force, a future. The morning after the Tech Expo, Naomi stood in front of the mirror inside the staff bathroom, staring at her own reflection like it belonged to someone else. The navy blazer Julian had given her now hung from a hook, replaced by her usual worn work shirt, sleeves rolled up, grease already staining the fabric. But something in her eyes had shifted. She wasn't trying to disappear anymore. For the first time, she wanted to be seen. The whispers started the moment she stepped into the red bay. Engineers glanced up, murmuring to each other. Marcus didn't say anything, but his smirk was louder than words. Naomi went straight to her workstation, logged into the diagnostic interface, and began running recalibration protocols on the E-Phoenix prototype. She didn't need approval. She needed results. By noon, the prototype was stable for the first time in 6 days. By afternoon, Julian sent an internal memo praising the team's performance, ending it with a single line. "Special recognition to Naomi Akande for her diagnostic precision." Her hands trembled when she read it. Recognition was something she'd only seen given to others, never to her. But that evening, everything changed. She returned to the employee lounge for dinner, where her usual corner table now buzzed with low conversations. A tablet had been left on the chair, screen still lit, article open. Naomi stopped in her tracks. The headline blared like a siren. "From Bridge to Bentley, is Julian Ease grooming his own Cinderella?" Below it was a photo of her and Julian at the expo, his hand lightly resting on her back. The subtext wasn't admiration. It was accusation. "Sleeping her way to success," scrolled in bold just beneath. Her face burned. Her hands shook. She scrolled down, heart sinking with every comment. Some laughed, some cursed, some speculated. None knew her. But now the world thought it did. That night, back under her blanket at the workers' hostel, Naomi couldn't sleep. The gloves Julian had gifted her sat in her lap, once a symbol of trust, now feeling like a trap. She clutched them tightly, remembering the way he'd said, "These were always meant to fit you." Were they? Or had she been foolish to believe that someone like her could walk freely among giants without being crushed? The next morning, her locker had been vandalized. A red spray-painted message stretched across the metal. Pet Project. She stood staring at it while others walked past in silence. Lami approached quietly and tried to clean it with disinfectant wipes. "Ignore them," she whispered. "Julian believes in you." Naomi nodded but said nothing. Belief wasn't enough when the whole world thought she was a joke. At lunch, no one sat with her. She ate alone in the corner again, eyes down, pretending she didn't hear the whispers. Marcus passed by, smirking. "So, what's it like being a startup celebrity?" She didn't respond. She just looked at him long enough for his smile to falter. That afternoon, in the Red Bay, Naomi ran one final test, shut down her terminal, and began to pack. She took off the blazer, folded it neatly, removed her ID badge, placed it on the desk. Then, finally, slowly, she unwrapped the gloves from her bag and laid them gently on top. No note, no speech, just silence. She walked out through the sliding glass doors without looking back. No one stopped her. No one called her name. The world moved on like she had never been there. Julian didn't notice her absence until late evening. He stepped into the Red Bay expecting to find her deep in code, but her desk was empty. Then he saw the gloves, the folded coat, the card. His heart dropped like metal on concrete. "Where is she?" he demanded. No one answered. Dapo approached, hesitant. "She saw the article. I think she thought walking away would protect your reputation." Julian didn't wait for more. He ran to the elevator, phone in hand, dial in her number over and over again. No answer. He drove himself through the streets of Lagos, not caring about meetings or calls or traffic. He went straight to the only place that made sense. The rusted bridge near Okodu. It was after midnight. The air was thick with dust and memory. And there she was, standing under a flickering lamppost, backpack slung over one shoulder, sack of clothes beside her. Naomi didn't flinch when she saw him. She just looked at him like he was too late. "I was going to leave," she said softly. "Disappear. Start over somewhere no one knows my name or mocks it." Julian stepped out of the car. The air between them was heavy, electric. "Don't," he said, his voice raw. "Don't leave me in a world that doesn't have you in it." Naomi blinked. "Why? So you can fix your PR?" Julian shook his head. "I didn't just lose an engineer when you walked out, Naomi. I lost my reason." She said nothing, just stared at him. "What do you want from me now?" she asked. Julian stepped closer, slow and deliberate. "Everything," he said, "but I'll take whatever part of you you're willing to give. Just don't go." For a moment, neither moved. Then Naomi let her bag slip from her shoulder, the sound of it hitting the ground barely audible over her breathing. They stood like that until the city around them fell quiet. At dawn, Julian took her to one place he had never taken anyone else, the cemetery where his own father had been buried. But he didn't stop at his father's grave. He led her to another, more worn, more forgotten. "Is this?" Naomi whispered. "Yes," Julian said. "I found where your father was buried." She knelt, fingers trembling, tracing the faded words on the stone. Moses Akande, mechanic, father, dreamer. Julian knelt beside her. "Sir," he said quietly, "your daughter fixed more than my car. She fixed my life. If it's all right with you, I'd like her to help me build it." Naomi looked away, eyes wet. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. They stood in silence, the sun rising behind them. From that moment on, nothing was ever the same again. Back at the tech lab, the board was furious. Investors were split. Rumors flooded the industry. But Julian didn't back down. At the Tech for Tomorrow gala that night, he took the stage, staring out at a sea of faces expecting a product launch. Instead, they got truth. "You're expecting me to pitch innovation," he began. "But tonight, I'm here to talk about integrity." He paused. The room hushed. "Naomi Akande is not my project. She's not my charity case. She's the most capable engineer I've worked with in a decade. And if you have a problem with that, walk out now." A few people stood, most stayed. He continued, "The world doesn't need another billionaire building machines. It needs people who can build futures, people like Naomi." The applause was slow at first, then it grew. By the time Julian left the stage, he already knew what he had to do next. That same night, he returned to Naomi's old shelter and found it empty. But she wasn't gone. She had gone back to Mushin, to the garage ruins, cleaning the dust from her father's tools, preparing to start again on her terms. Julian found her there, wrench in hand, hair tied back, sleeves rolled, like the girl he first met but stronger. "Still think you don't belong in my world?" he asked. Naomi looked up. "No," she said. "I think your world just got bigger." The sun poured through the skeletal remains of what used to be Otto Moses' garage, warming the dust that danced in golden light above the cracked cement. Naomi stood in the middle of the workshop, now empty except for rusted tools, peeled posters, and a half-collapsed workbench. She had returned not to mourn the past, but to meet it eye to eye, to remind herself where the fire began. She wore overalls this time, clean ones Julian had sent, but underneath them were her father's gloves, now hers, the fingers darkened with fresh oil and purpose. Julian stood near the entrance, his blazer hung on a hook, sleeves rolled as if he belonged there too. Neither of them spoke for a while. They worked together in silence, brushing off grime, sweeping up metal shavings, rescuing old bolts and frames like archaeologists piecing together a forgotten legend. When Naomi found the faded sign with her father's name, still barely legible through the rust, she didn't cry. She smiled. "He would have laughed at all this," she said. Julian looked over, wiping sweat from his brow. "What would he have said?" Naomi thought for a second. "He'd probably say, 'Why's this man in expensive shoes in my damn garage?'" They both laughed, the kind of laugh that cracked through walls of memory and soot. As the afternoon faded, Julian pulled out a folded paper and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked. "A proposal," he said, "but not the one you think." It was a blueprint, a reimagined version of Otto Moses, not as a garage, but as an academy. Naomi's Spark, a technical institute for girls. She scanned the layout: training bays, classrooms, a solar lab, a dormitory wing. Her fingers stopped at the logo, two intertwined wrenches forming the shape of a heart. "You did this?" she whispered. "No," Julian said softly. "We did." Her breath caught. "Why me?" He stepped closer, not touching her, just standing where the light hit both of them. "Because you fixed my car. Then you fixed my company. Then you fixed my thinking. And now, I'd like you to help me fix everything else." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something wrapped in black cloth. It was her father's gloves, cleaned, softened. Inside, one of them was a small box. Naomi blinked, her mouth parting but no words coming out. Julian dropped to one knee, not because tradition demanded it, but because respect did. He opened the box, revealing a simple ring with an engine bolt setting inlaid with a small sapphire. "I know your past has been filled with people walking away," he said, voice steady, "but I'm not one of them. I don't want to save you. I want to build with you. Marry me, Naomi." Her heart thundered like a misaligned crankshaft. For a moment she stared, frozen between everything she used to believe about the world and this single, impossible moment. Then, with shaking hands, she dropped to her knees too, right in front of him, took the ring and whispered, "Yes." Their wedding wasn't the kind of affair Lagos tabloids salivated over. There were no five-star hotels, no designer gowns flown in from Milan, no glossy sponsorships. It was held right there in the renovated garage. Old engine blocks were painted gold and stacked like altars. Oil barrels became flower stands. White roses curled around them like vines reclaiming meadow. Naomi wore a gown sewn by women from a shelter she'd been quietly funding with her paycheck. It wasn't fitted with crystals, but it shimmered with story. Julian wore a simple agbada with silver embroidery and bare feet on the cement floor. The guest list was a mosaic of the world they'd built: engineers, street vendors, young girls Naomi once mentored, the security guard who used to let her nap behind the market stalls, Simi, who cried through her maid of honor speech, and Lami, who clapped loudest when Naomi walked down the aisle. Julian's vows were steady, full of metaphors Naomi actually understood. "You are the missing component I didn't know my life needed. You complete the circuit." Naomi's voice cracked when she replied, "You didn't fix me. You just gave me space to run." After the ceremony, he led her to a corner of the garage, now shining with fresh paint and pride, where a black cloth covered a metal plaque. He pulled it off to reveal the sign, Naomi's Spark. A technical institute, a legacy, a revolution. She covered her mouth with both hands. "You did this without telling me?" He smiled. "No, we did it together. You just hadn't seen it yet." Her tears fell freely now, not from grief but from recognition. For once she was fully seen, fully known, fully home. In the months that followed, the garage became alive again. But it didn't smell like sorrow or fuel anymore. It smelled like promise. Girls from all over came to train girls who had been told they didn't belong in tech, in engines, in anything that sparked. Naomi taught them the same way her father had taught her, with patience, with hands-on fire, with stories. She taught them how to listen to machines and how to listen to themselves. She taught them that precision wasn't the opposite of emotion, it was born from it. Julian, now CEO of West Africa's largest green auto company, spent half his time in boardrooms and the other half helping Naomi build the curriculum, repair old tools, and hold babies while the younger girls trained. Their daughter, Zuri, was born 2 years later. A whirlwind of laughter and curls, she toddled around the garage with a plastic wrench in one hand and a tire bolt in the other. The mechanics loved her. The girls adored her. She grew up believing that machines could talk and her mother could understand them. Naomi still wore the gloves, not every day. But on the days she taught valve timing or rewired hybrid circuits, she slipped them on like armor, like memory, like magic. One evening, as the sunset turned the Lagos skyline into molten gold, Naomi stood outside the academy holding Zuri in her arms. The wind carried the scent of oil and hibiscus. A group of new students had just finished their first day. They waved goodbye with oil-streaked hands and shy smiles. Naomi looked at her daughter, then at the street where she once slept. Funny, she said softly. This road used to feel like a cage. Now it's a runway. Julian stepped beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulder. That's what happens when you build your own engine. Naomi looked into the distance, into the camera, into the soul of anyone who was watching. Even broken engines run again, she whispered. Even broken people rise. And, with her daughter in one arm and her future in the other, she turned toward the glow of tomorrow. No prince, no savior, just a woman, a wrench, and the world she rebuilt with her own hands. Years passed, but the flame inside Naomi Akande never dimmed. If anything, it grew fiercer, deeper, more focused. Naomi's spark became more than just a name on a building. It became a signal across Lagos, then across West Africa, and eventually across continents. Girls who had once held brooms now held soldering irons. Girls who whispered their names now stood on international stages explaining engine compression ratios in 3 languages. Naomi never chased fame, but it found her anyway. She appeared on magazine covers not because of what she wore, but because of what she built. She spoke at summits not because she had the right accent, but because her voice carried weight. The world called her the Mechanic Queen. But in her classroom, she was still just Auntie Naomi, the woman who made mistakes on the whiteboard so her students wouldn't be afraid to do the same. At home, she was Mom, the woman who smelled like grease and jasmine, who told bedtime stories about crankshafts and courage. Zuri was now 6, and already curious beyond her years. She asked why the moon didn't fall from the sky, why tires had tread patterns, and why girls were told they couldn't be pilots. Naomi always answered with a smile, because some people still don't know what we're capable of, but we show them every day. Julian watched them from the doorway of their modest home overlooking the ocean. Despite the success, they hadn't moved into a mansion. They stayed near the academy, in a house filled with books, engine parts, and warmth. He still ran his company, but it was Naomi who inspired its direction. Every new model carried her input. Every new initiative bore her philosophy. Build clean, build fair, build people. But the world wasn't always ready. One day, an international auto conglomerate offered to partner with Naomi's Spark under one condition. She would step down and allow them to rebrand the school under their name. They promised more funding, bigger reach, flashy buildings. Naomi politely declined. "You can buy machines," she said. "You can't buy a soul." The backlash was swift. Media pundits called her arrogant. Donors pulled out. Julian's board questioned his objectivity again. Even some of her own staff began to doubt. "What if this sinks us?" one asked. "Then we rebuild again," Naomi answered. "From the ground up, like always." But not everyone agreed. Her lead financial officer quietly began negotiations behind her back, planning to hand over partial control to the conglomerate in exchange for personal gain. Naomi discovered the betrayal during a routine audit. She didn't raise her voice. She simply walked into the staff hall the next morning with a wrench in one hand and a bucket of white paint in the other. She crossed out the man's name from the office door and replaced it with the name of a second-year student who had just developed a self-cooling engine block model from scrap metal. "Let's stop rewarding title," she said. "Let's reward value." The entire building buzzed. Some were shocked. Some were angry. Most were inspired. The press, of course, came running. "Are you afraid this move will hurt your reputation?" one reporter asked. Naomi looked into the camera and replied, "Reputation is what the world thinks you are. Legacy is what your daughters inherit. I build for them. The clip went viral in less than 24 hours. Women from Kenya to Brazil to Vietnam began posting photos fixing things with the hashtag Naomi Built Me. Something had shifted, not just in Lagos, everywhere. The world was finally listening. Naomi's spark received a surprise email one morning from MIT inviting Naomi to deliver a keynote at the Global Tech Future Summit. She almost declined, but Julian smiled and said, "You told our girls not to hide their light. Don't hide yours now." She traveled alone, nervous in the airport, still wearing the same scarf style she always had, walking through terminals filled with polished shoes and foreign tongues. When she took the stage at the summit, she didn't open with tech jargon or statistics. She opened with a story about a girl who once lived under a bridge, who fixed a stranger's car, and ended up rebuilding her country's view of women. The audience stood when she finished, not because she was eloquent, but because she was real. She flew back that night, clutching a model Zuri had made out of scrap parts and clay, a car that looked like a spaceship and a message for Mommy's Academy of Dreams. Naomi held it close all the way home. The following week, Julian surprised her with something even she couldn't have predicted. A massive freight container arrived at the Academy's rear gate. When they opened it, inside was her father's old garage sign, now restored, polished, mounted on a steel frame. Below it was a new plaque. "From this ground, legends rise." Naomi touched the sign like it was his hand. She didn't cry. She smiled and whispered, "Thank you." Years later, Naomi stood in front of her largest class, yet 80 girls from 9 countries. Some had lost parents. Some had fled conflict. Some had never held a tool in their lives, but all of them had light in their eyes. She didn't start by asking them what they knew. She asked them what they'd been told they couldn't do. The answers ranged from fly planes to build robots to own businesses. Naomi laughed softly. "Good. That means we're exactly where we need to be." That night, she tucked Zuri into bed and sat by the window with Julian. The wind carried the sound of hammers and laughter from the Academy's workshop, even at night. "You remember what you said to me the day you found me?" she asked. Julian nodded. "I said you were a solution waiting to happen." Naomi leaned her head on his shoulder. "You were right, but I wasn't the only one." In the courtyard below, the statue of her father stood tall, grease on his apron, a wrench in one hand, and a small girl holding his other. Naomi's spark wasn't just a building, it was a fire. And fires, once lit with purpose, never truly die. They spread, they warm, they ignite. As the stars settled above Lagos, Naomi whispered one final promise to the night. "This is just the beginning."